Sakshi TV's special immigration talk show. I'm your host, Shivani Raj. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 4 immigration shows every week. On Tuesday with Lawyer Kaveti, on Wednesdays with Prashanthi Reddy in English, on Thursdays with Chand Parvatneni, and on Fridays with Banu Nidra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note the information provided on this show is not legal advice and for general information purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for the use of information. If you need any specific legal advice, you can contact the attorney directly. Ms. Prashanthi Reddy needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, you can definitely log on to her firm, which is reddy.esq. So without any further delay, let's welcome Ms. Reddy on our show. Welcome back, Prashanthi Reddy Garu. How are you?
I'm good, Shivani. Hope you're well also.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reddy. Before we get on to our topic today, which is the H1 Cap Issues FAQs, are there any latest immigration updates, or do you want me to continue?
You can start with the topic because that itself is an update.
Yes. So my first question to you is, Ms. Reddy, what is an H1B collusion?
So yeah, today's topic, Shivani, I decided we'll talk about everything H1B cap, simply because this is June end is when all H1B cap cases can be filed. So we are gearing up to file the cap cases before the deadline. So it's important to know at this point how to file your cap case, what are the nuances of filing a cap case, and go through some general questions with reference to H1B cap, some of the frequently asked questions. So that's the agenda for today. With reference to collusion, now that's a hot topic, H1B collusion. This year, the H1B registrations skyrocketed. There were about 780,000 registrations filed this year, compared to about 400,000 registrations last year. So almost double the number. And USCIS has given us information recently that out of that 780,000 registrations, about 400,000 are duplicates. So about half of those registrations are duplicate registrations. Duplicate registrations because beneficiaries have filed more than one petition through different employees, through different employers, through different companies. As a result of which, USCIS is really looking to see what has happened. They're looking at frivolous registrations. But more importantly, what they've said is that they're looking at registrations which have been filed through collusion. So part of the H1B registration law says that companies cannot collude with each other to file for beneficiaries with the intent of increasing their chances of getting picked in the cap lottery. As a result of which, this year in the H1B registrations, there was an attestation requirement attached to the registration process itself. So when you're signing for the registration, you're signing that under the penalty of perjury, you will not collude. If you're an employer, you will not collude with another employer to file H1B registrations for the same beneficiary for the sole purpose of increasing their chances of getting picked in the lottery. So what's happening is company A, B, and C together are filing for the same beneficiaries. And then when it's picked through either companies, A, B, or C, then they are basically colluding, or they're working with each other to make sure they get some benefit from that beneficiary being picked. So one is acting as the vendor, maybe another is acting as a sub-vendor, and one is acting as the employer. So everyone gets some revenue in the entire process. So that is not allowed by USCIS. That is what collusion is.
Yes.
And USCIS has found that USCIS has said that they will go after companies who have done this because they want to make sure that the H1B registration system, the process actually works. They want to make sure that, people don't file duplicate registrations and, waste H1B registration. H1B registration, as we know, there are only 85,000 total H1B numbers. So they want to make sure that employers don't waste numbers by filing for the, different employers filing for the same beneficiary, because the beneficiary finally will only file one H1. But then that same beneficiary is using up so many numbers. So as a result of all these duplicates filed, the pick rate this year has been only 7%, as opposed to about 25-30% last year. So pretty much what's happening, Shivani, is that the registration process has not worked this year. And it won't work if these duplicates continue. So USCIS is trying to somehow, lock down on this duplicate registration process. And the way they're doing this is recently they've published a press release saying that they are going to go after companies that have colluded. And, they might, as a next step, also go after companies who have filed hundreds of registrations, but are not going to file a single H1. So that's a secondary thing that they might go after. So let's see, wait and watch what happens, and we'll see what happens from there. So that's what H1B collusion is.
Yes. What is not a collusion? And also, Ms. Reddy, according to you, will there be a second lottery this year?
So what is not a collusion? So it's important to understand what is a H1B collusion and what is not. The reason why it's so important is a lot of employers and employees, so beneficiaries as well as companies, are very scared after that press release was published, and even legitimate employers who have not colluded, and even beneficiaries who have filed multiple registrations but where there was no collusion involved, are not filing their H1B petitions. They're scared to file their H1B petitions. So what's happening is, basically, what is not a collusion? It's important to understand what is a collusion, what is not a collusion, so you don't have to be scared and you know whether you can safely file your H1B petition or not. So if a beneficiary files through several companies, but those companies did not collude together and decide, that they will all file for that beneficiary, then it's not a collusion, because a beneficiary is allowed to file multiple H1B registrations through various companies. That's allowed. What is not allowed is, as I said, companies colluding together to benefit the beneficiary. But if there's no collusion between the companies, but the beneficiary independently contacted various companies and filed petitions through them, then it's not a collusion. Another thing that is not a collusion is, say, there are three related companies. Maybe the same owner has three companies and he files for the same beneficiary. But if the job is for a completely different entity, it's a completely separate job offer, then it's not a collusion. For example, company A, company B, and company C are all part of the same, all have the same ownership. But company A, the beneficiary has a job offer through an end client, which is Johnson & Johnson. Company B has a job offer through a different end client, maybe Wipro. Company C, different end client. So these are different job offers, and therefore there is no collusion here. So one instance where there's no collusion is where the beneficiary is independently filing through different companies. Another instance where there's no collusion is the same company or sister companies or related companies are filing, but the job offer is completely different. So there's no collusion there also. So it's important to understand where there is no collusion. In those instances, it's completely safe to file your H1B petition. So it's important to understand that. With reference to your question now, with reference to the lottery, will there be another lottery? Since there has been about 50% of the cases, there have been duplicate cases. People are getting scared to file due to these reasons, and also because out of these duplicate cases, a lot of cases have been instances of collusion. So in those instances, companies will most probably not file, especially after the press release. So it's unlikely, and also there have been a lot of frivolous registrations that were filed, and the market has gone south because of layoffs, etc. So there are no jobs available. People have filed speculatively for registrations, and they thought that they could find a job, in the 90 days that it takes, that is given to them to file the H1B, and they have not been able to file jobs. So a lot of registrations that way have been wasted. H1Bs have not been filed. So it's quite likely that this round of all the registrations that have been picked, that a lot of them will not be used. If they're not used, generally USCIS will, because they don't want to waste the H1B numbers, they should have another lottery. So let's hope they do. Most probably, we're expecting, since the filings will be low because of these reasons, it's likely that they will have another lottery. But let's wait and see. We'll know after June, as soon as all the H1s have been filed for this lottery.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, we did decide that we'll go to the basics in this episode. So let's go down to the basic and let's understand what exactly is an H1B visa.
H1B visa is really a work visa and one of the most popular work visas in the US. H1B can be filed for a person where the job requires a bachelor's degree in a specific field. So not all jobs require a bachelor's degree, so only those jobs, professional positions, really qualify for H1B. For example, most IT positions, accountants, lawyers, doctors, a lot of healthcare workers, any worker, any job that requires a bachelor's degree, really in a specific field, is qualifies for a H1. It's pretty much a non-immigrant work visa.
Yes. Ms. Reddy, let's talk about the qualifications that are needed for the H1Bs, and also how long does a H1B visa last, and what are some advantages that people with H1B can have?
So let's take one question at a time. What is the first question?
I asked about what are the requirements and qualifications
the requirements,
required for the H1B.
Right. The educational requirements are really a bachelor's in a specific fields that is related to the occupation. So, for example, if you are working as a software engineer, if the industry requires a software engineer to have a bachelor's in computer science, then really that is a specialty occupation. So the job offer should require a bachelor's in a specific field. Then that's really a specialty occupation. How do you know if the job requires it? You have to look at, you could look at the Department of Labor website, which is called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. It's called the OH, Occupational Outlook Handbook. That's the database that USCIS refers to. So it's easy for us to refer to that as well and see what the requirements are for each position. So if that database says, for example, that a software engineer job requires a bachelor's degree in computer science, then it is a specialty occupation. But if the database says that a software engineer position requires a bachelor's degree, say in engineering, or a bachelor's degree in arts, or something that is not specific but generic, then most probably USCIS will consider that occupation is not qualified for a H1, and because it's not a specialty occupation.
Yes. So who exactly can file the H1B petition, Ms. Reddy?
Any employer who requires that person to work for them can file a H1B petition. So an employer, as defined, is an employer who has a business that can show that the job opportunity is not speculative. So it's not only do you have to say that you have a job, you have to prove that you have a job. So in order to prove that you have a job, you have to show, for example, if you're a consulting company in which that requirement is the most stringent, and that's most often that they ask that question in that situation, they will ask you to show a PO, a purchase order, or a work order, contract, MSA, anything to show that you have, a contract with a client, and you will place that employee at that client site. So you have to show that you have a valid job offer. You have to show that the job offer is not speculative. And as an employer, you should meet the basic requirements of an employer. You should have registered your business. You should have a bank account. I think it's important to also have a commercial office space, because a home office, USCIS will always talk about what the zoning laws are, and that you can't run an office out of your home. So these are some of the requirements for an employer, and these employers who meet these requirements can file a H1.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, does the H1B have an annual cap, and how does it actually work?
Yeah, so the H1B has a cap. The cap is 65,000 for bachelor's degree holders and 20,000 for master's degree holders. What happens is, for the master's degree holders, USCIS has a separate lottery, and once if they don't get picked in that lottery, then that same candidate will be run through the bachelor's lottery as well. So 2 lotteries. Master's degree people will have 2 shots at the apple that get picked twice, and the bachelor's degree get picked once. So that's how it works. Master's cap people are people who have a master's degree in the US from a private, not-for-profit organization or a public organization. And also the university should be accredited. So these are the qualifications, requirements. It's not just any master's degree, but they have to meet these requirements.
Yes. So now that you've just given a basic introduction about the master's cap, can you explain in detail what exactly is the H1B master's cap?
As I said, it's 20,000. The cap limit is 20,000, and people who meet that requirement can file under the H1B master's cap. In addition, when you're doing the H1B registration, you don't have to show that you have a master's degree, but you have to show that you have a master's degree as of the date of actually filing the H1. So important that you meet that requirement of a master's degree at the time of filing, which is now, basically.
Yes. And also, are all petitions subjected to the cap?
So there are also some cap exempt petitions. All those cases where the company is a non-profit research organization, or where the company is an organization which is an educational institution, they are all exempt from the cap. So there's, for example, a teaching hospital will be exempt from the cap, or a government research organization will be exempt from a cap. Also, people who have already filed or been on a H1 in the past 6 years, since they have been already counted towards the cap, they are also exempt from the cap requirements.
Yes. So let's talk about the H1B petition. Who and how can one file an H1B petition?
As I said, the employers can file a H1B petition. And when, you said, but what is your question?
And I said, who can file the H1B petition? How can one
who?
file it?
How? So who, we already know. We already answered that question.
Yes.
How? You pretty much you have to file. So the registration is over right now. Let's talk about the present process. The registration was done on April 1st. So you could have filed your petition anytime after April 1st. So between April 1st and June 30th is when you're supposed to file your H1B petition. H1B petition has to be filed with an I-129, with the I-129 forms, a petitioner letter, the LCA, and all the supporting documents, your educational documents, proof of status if the person is presently in the country, your passport. So these are all the documents required to file. You have to file in the address which is noted in your registration notice. When you get picked for the registration, you get a notice and it will tell you where to file. So, and then you have to file with the requisite fees. So, this is how you file a H1B Cap petition, and you have to file with the start date of October 1st.
Yes.
Because that's when the fiscal year starts.
Yes. So let's talk about the LCA, which is the labor condition application. What is a H1B labor condition application?
So before you file the H1B petition, you have to file an application with the Labor Department. And that's called the labor condition application. When you're filing the LCA, what's contained in the LCA is basically the wage that you're going to be paying. So the DOI wants to make sure you're paying the prevailing wage. The work location will be mentioned. The client side, if there is a separate client side in IT consulting situations, that has to be mentioned. And there are some attestations with reference to whether you're H1B dependent or not. So all that information is there usually in an LCA. The LCA is filed online with the Department of Labor. The LCA usually takes 5 to 7 business days to get approved. So it's important to note that if you have to file your petitions by the end of this month, you have to give enough time for the LCA to be approved before you can actually file the petition. So make sure you start the process well in advance of the deadline so that you'll have enough time to get an LCA approval, because you cannot file your H1B petition without first getting an LCA approval from the Labor Department.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, is there a specified H1B salary, and how exactly is it determined?
Yeah, so the salary, you have to pay what is the prevailing industry wage. You can get the prevailing wage either by going to FLCA data, which is the website from the Department of Labor, and they'll tell you what is the salary for a particular position. They usually give 4 levels of salary, and you can decide which level of salary you want to give. Usually, level 2 should be fine. Level 1, there might be issues if you use level 1 salary, especially if the person is not a fresh candidate. So if it's an experienced candidate, then you might, the job is for an experienced position, then USCIS might have issues if you use level 1 salary. But so you can use anything from level 2 to level 4, I think, depending on, the amount of experience that your candidate has, the number of years, whether the job requires a bachelor's or a master's, and the number of years of experience required for the job. So you could also, if you don't want to use the Labor Department website, you can also use your own private salary survey. But you have to make sure that the private salary survey, you have to make sure you get from them the methodology that they're using to, get that wage. You have to make sure they use the average wage. So there are certain preconditions for using a private survey. So as long as you meet those preconditions, you can use a private survey as well.
Yes. So, Ms. Reddy, my question to you is, are the H1B holders supposed to pay for the taxes when they are still on the H1B visa?
Yes, they are subject to all the taxes that anybody else is. In addition to that, since they're eligible for Social Security, that would be deducted. Some employers will deduct. Medicaid is also deducted, and some employers might deduct health insurance, etc. So, they are really subject to the taxes that anybody else in the US is subject to. So yes, they do have to pay taxes.
Yes. And also, Ms. Reddy, how long is the H1B visa processing time? How soon or how late can one expect for the H1Bs?
If you do premium processing, it will take they say it will take 30 days, but usually it takes a week or 2. For the cap cases, premium processing is open, so we're happy about that. Otherwise, might take about 3 to 4 months for them to adjudicate a H1B.
Yes. And also, can one expedite the H1B petition process?
Yes, as I was saying, you can do premium processing. You have to file a form called the I-907 and you have to pay the premium processing fee, which is presently 2,500. And the processing time for that is, they say, is 30 days. So they promise to process your case within 30 days. That could be either they might send an RFE in 30 days or they might send an approval. But as I said, they don't take the entire 30 days. They usually process it before that.
Yes. And finally, Ms. Reddy, can we talk about how much fee does it cost for the whole H1 processing?
Yeah, so 460 is the basic fee, and then there is a $500 fee for all those cases that are not extensions. There's also an ACIWA fee, which is 1,500 or 750, depending on the number of employees. So there's a whole bunch of fees that are applicable, anywhere from 1,700 to 2,000 plus for an application. So it depends really on the number of employees and the type of case.
Yes. I think, Ms. Reddy, we can definitely continue more in the next episode. Thank you again for tuning in. Thank you for the viewers for watching. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.